when I'm no longer an athlete, I'll start playing pickleball. Now, I know I'm going to get a lot of hate mail for that one.
That's awesome.
I know a lot of good athletes have switched over to playing pickleball, but it's similar enough to racquetball that I don't really want to switch over to that and compete with a lot of the same guys. And I wanted to reinvent myself when I finally did decide to step away from the game.
Move over, baby boomers. It's time for Gen XYZ. It's time to stop waiting on the world to change. It's time to be the change. It's time to stop thinking about how your life can be better. It's time to start taking action, massive action to improve your life. Join Zach Winter and Markadair Rios every week as we learn how others had the grit, determination, and conviction to 10x their lives, and as we explore ways that can help you 10x your life.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the 10X for Gen XYZ podcast. I'm Zach Winter.
And I'm Markadair Rios.
And our guest today is Darrin Chatter. He was a professional racquetball player for 6 years, 3 of which he was in the top 20 in the world. He spent 15 years as a head coach at Arizona State University for their racquetball team, and he's a 2-time recipient of the Collegiate Coach of the Year Award. During his tenure at ASU, the racquetball team won a women's national championship and had 36 collegiate All-Americans and 15 top 10 finishes. He's a public speaker and a coach for sports, businesses, and self-improvement, and he's an entrepreneur, and we'll get into a little bit about what he's doing on the entrepreneurship side as well. Darren, welcome to the podcast. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
Yeah, our pleasure. So let's start off by talking about your career as a professional racquetball player. Yes, thank you. So I have kind of a unique beginning story to that. And this probably segues into some other things that we'll talk about as well. The short version is that I thought I was going to be a high school and then collegiate wrestler. I'm the oldest grandchild. I thought that was my ticket to getting into college and setting the tone for the other kids in the family at some point. But wrestling off for a position on the team my freshman year, I shot a takedown. My opponent sprawled like he's supposed to, and I heard something go, psh, and the coach yelled, "Stop, stop, stop, you're hurt." And I rolled over and said, "Who's hurt?" And he said, "You are, don't move." And what I found out later was I actually broke a bone that sticks off of my spine in my neck instead of the actual spinal cord itself. But I did kind of experience some shock. My feet were numb. My face was tingling. I got strapped down to a board, taken across the street to the hospital, 8 weeks in a neck brace, yada, yada. That was the end of my wrestling career. But oddly enough, that's how I ended up getting into racquetball. I wanted to find another individual sport, even though I'm part of a team as a wrestler. I could go 0 for 10 or 10-0 as an individual, right? And I played Little League baseball and stuff, and I wasn't a standout in that sport. So wrestling, I thought, was my ticket to get to college. Well, my uncle ended up taking my dad and I to play racquetball outdoors, which is 3 walls, no ceiling. Like,
these are the cement walls?
Yes. And my uncle, I'll be politically correct, he was not a pillar of fitness at the time. And I thought, I'm a cocky wrestler, right? I'm thinking, I'm going to run circles around you, right? Like, I can't believe you wanted to do this with me.
And you're a freshman in college now?
High school.
In high school. Okay, so you blew out you had that injury your first year in high school.
Yeah, and literally in August of the first month of the first year in high school, yeah. So it radically changed my life plans for sure. So my uncle just runs me all over the place, right? He spotted me 15 points to 21. The only time I scored was when he made an error. And I'm like, this can't be happening, right? Like, what is going on? So I told him, I'm like, give me a month and I'm coming back and we're having a rematch. So I would walk across the street from my house to the courts over there and practice. And I did that for 30 days in a row and came back and we had a rematch and he spotted me 15 points to 21. And eventually on the 4th game when he was tired, I actually did win. But he spotted me 15 points. So I only scored 6. But I was more competitive to the point where I ran him around and got him tired, that by the 4th game, I was actually able to score enough points. And in my head at the time, that was a win, right?
Sure.
And that's really what got me started was as a 16-year-old kid, there was, or 15 at the time, there was girls hanging out at the racquetball courts. So that was a big plus. And I discovered that I could work on almost every aspect of the game by myself and then test it against an opponent. And to me, that was really appealing. So that's how I got started.
Did you have a coach, or is it all self-taught and picked it up on your own?
Self-taught. And this was way before YouTube or any of that stuff, right?
That's one of those things where you go to the library and the sports section and get like the racquetball book.
Pretty much.
The first racquetball book with those old pictures. And
yep. Steve Strandemo.
And that were you playing on these? You were playing on these outdoor courts with the cement walls.
Yep.
Not at like official racquetball clubs.
Well, that's the funny part. In the next phase of the story, the guys that I got to be friends with at the park where I played, one of them also had a membership at a club. And he came to the park one day and he had a stack of flyers for a pro tournament that was coming here to Phoenix. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, we got to go. We got to play. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I'll give it a try. Now, to be clear, there's all kinds of amateur divisions in that as part of that pro event.
Right.
So I sign up. I take the day off school. I'm the first match of the first hour of the first day of the tournament. And I lose 15-1, 15-0.
Ooh.
Because I had never played indoors. So I didn't know how to deal with the geometry of the back wall and the ceiling.
Yeah,
right.
I never even thought about that being an issue, right? Because to me, racquetball was outdoors.
Right.
And so I show up at the club and I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be a problem. So I'm sitting on the bleachers pouting about getting my butt kicked. And the tournament director walks over and says, hey, a guy in your division, the novice division, didn't show up. Do you want to play in his place? I'm like, heck yeah, let's go. I got beat just as bad the second time. But in between that, when I was sitting there pouting on the bleachers, I'm watching the pros play. And I was blown away. I mean, the guys were diving all over the wood floor, hitting the ball literally 160 miles an hour or more. You know, some of them had some very attractive women with them. They're wearing these cool warm-up suits. They're traveling around the country playing racquetball for a living. I thought, man, sign me up. This is what I want to do. And despite being the only guy with the designation of losing twice in the lowest amateur division possible, I decided right then and there that I was going to be a pro racquetball player.
Love that. Yeah. So, you know, it's really interesting is like when I was a kid, you know, this is the late 70s or so, that like racquetball was huge. It was like one of the big fitness. It's probably early 80s too, somewhere around there. But
that was the heyday.
And like, my mother was part of this gym. And I just remember like, that's where all this stuff was happening, was downstairs in the racquetball courts. And like, I just remember like seeing the glass and just checking these dudes out, and they were animals, man. They were just going at it.
Yeah.
And it was pretty nuts, right? Like they just had this, you know.
Out he's drawn right away. It just fit my personality. And again, being an individual sport and stuff, it was what I was looking for.
Right on.
So how did you learn how to play, you know, at a more competitive level?
So after that particular event, or actually at that event, I got to meet a guy that was a teaching pro here in Phoenix. And I'll circle back to his son coming to ASU when we get to that part. But I took some lessons from him, learned the real basic stuff, and then was able to go and practice it a lot in between the lessons that I had with him. And then I just kept playing tournament after tournament and watching what the other players would do. You know, I of course, got some bad habits and had to backtrack a little bit, move, you know, left or right, and then move farther forward kind of a thing. But, you know, throughout my career, I didn't have the luxury of having, you know, a bankroll from my family to have private lessons once a week and all that kind of stuff. I definitely did it, you know, the blue collar old fashioned way. I mean, I was mowing lawns and doing handiwork around my neighborhood to make money to pay my tournament entries so that I could do it. So looking back, that was a great life experience for sure, because I truly had skin in the game. I wasn't getting handed $50 to go play a tournament and get out of the house. I was mowing lawns to make $50 to go enter a tournament so that I could probably get my butt kicked, but at least I could be in that environment and take notes and learn and make friends with people who were better players and ask them questions and things like that.
You know, it's really interesting. And what, it sounds like you kind of just jumped into the community, like really quick as well, right? I mean, getting a mentor from that first one and kind of meeting people, and it's almost as if you landed in this home that you knew you were kind of already there in a way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was not, after the wrestling accident, I did not have a ton of interest in high school. I ended up hanging out with the people at the park and then eventually at athletic clubs who were typically an older crowd. And I just sort of, plugged into that, like you said, and became part of that society instead of hanging out with my high school friends and being, at a football game every Friday night and going to dances and things like that. It just really wasn't what I was looking to do at that time. And so I kind of went through the motions in high school and then really, really focused on the racquetball scene.
Were you doing a sport in high school or just doing like PE physical ed classes to make it through?
Yeah, just PE stuff. I was not good enough to make the high school baseball team. And after the wrestling injury, I didn't feel comfortable going back and having a possible similar or worse experience. And so I just kind of segued right out of all high school sports at that point.
What kind of training were you doing at that point as you're starting to compete to, strength training, resistance training, endurance training?
So one of the charms of racquetball is that there isn't necessarily an ideal body type. Like if I was 6'4" with a long reach, that's almost the equivalent of being 5'7", which I am, and fast, right? Because you're defending a finite amount of space. Those things are kind of equal. As long as you have one or the other, you're good. But I've always been a small guy. Like I weigh 170 pounds now. That's 35 pounds more than I weighed when I played on the pro tour.
Wow.
So earlier in my career, I was really skinny. And so I wasn't, muscle strength like bench press doesn't convert into speed and power on a racquetball court.
Yeah.
So I got the opportunity to meet a really amazing player in my region. He was actually from New Mexico, and we're still very, very close friends till this day. His name is Louis Vogel. He had a training coach, Steve Gallegos, and that name may ring a bell. He was an alternate on the 1980 Olympic track team who boycotted the Olympic Games. So unfortunately, he did not get to go. But Louis was training with Steve and doing all these crazy plyometric workouts and all that stuff. And he invited me to come to New Mexico and learn how to do this so that I could take it back to Phoenix and then do it on my own. Oh my goodness, we did some crazy stuff. I mean, the first time they tried to get me to do handstand push-ups, Steve's holding my feet while I'm trying to hold a handstand. He's like, "Are you ready?" I said, "Yeah." And he let me go and bam, I hit my head on the concrete. Oh, he stars for a second. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not ready to do handstand push-ups. And, just crazy lunges and hops and all these plyometric moves that were so applicable to the fast, explosive sport of racquetball that's one of the things I'm so grateful for, because it was an asset that lots of other players didn't have during their career.
Yeah, totally. And I was just thinking about how, we were talking about the walls, right? You have the back wall, and it's not just that you're chasing a ball. You're space limited in the way that you chase a ball, and you have to make a flash decision as to whether you're going to let it bounce off the wall, hang back, and use the bounce, or chase after it and try to hit it before it hits the wall, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a little bit of chess playing, but it's like extreme speed chess, right? Because you got to make that decision instantaneously.
Yeah.
Or you miss your shot.
It also seems like it's a little bit like billiards, right? Like you have to calculate where the ball's going to go bouncing off the different walls.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It is high-speed chess with a lot of geometry thrown in the mix.
Yeah.
So you competed locally through high school. Were you doing some traveling during high school as well to compete in other areas?
A little bit. I had a limited budget to do it, but I got to know some people that, like, if I went to a regional championships in New Mexico, I stayed with some people that, kind of just allowed me to tag along without having to pay my part of the hotel bill, kind of a thing. Yeah. So I did get the opportunity to do that. And then after high school, I went to Northern Arizona University for a year, and I had a guy that owned a construction company that sponsored me. And in exchange for that, I taught him lessons and I gave him some equipment and things like that. And so that made my life a little bit easier because I was really on a tight budget in college, but he was interested in supporting me as well as learning how to play the game from me. So that was kind of the trade-off. He was funding my trips to tournaments, and I was working with him when I wasn't away to help him get better himself.
I see.
Were you now in college? You have you had a sales career, so were you kind of were you studying sports in college? Did you kind of stay along that track, or did you decide to get kind of back yourself up with a marketable degree, as they say nowadays?
Yeah, I'm more psyched for that. I went to college because it was expected of me, and I never did hone in on a major or even a general business degree kind of approach.
Right.
I went for 1 year, and then I left, moved back to Phoenix, started working at a health club to pursue the racquetball thing.
Yeah.
I always knew that I could go back to school, and I promised that I would, because my family wasn't thrilled about the idea that I was leaving school to go be a starving racquetball player. But it was the only thing I was sure about at that time of my life. Right. I knew I could go back to school. I would figure out what to do as a career later on. But as an athlete, you have a window of time, and I didn't want that to expire while I was trying to muddle my way through college.
Yeah.
So when you left college to pursue professional racquetball, what's your average week like? I mean, what are you doing during the week? How often are you playing, and do you have a job to supplement your income?
Yeah, so I was really good at living lean. So I worked at a health club, and my hours were 8 a.m. to noon, and then 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. So I would show up at 6:30. I would practice on my own. I would work in the pro shop, stringing rackets and doing stuff. I would eat while I was on my shift, which I probably wasn't supposed to, but then at 12:01, I was either in the weight room or back on the court playing a practice match. And so I would do that in the afternoon, take a break for a little bit, eat, start my shift from 4 to 8. And then sometimes after 8 o'clock, I was working out or I was running or doing something like that to finish the day.
Yeah.
And then, of course, tournaments on all the weekends that they were available.
And I'm sure, did they tap you for, teaching lessons and things like that at a certain point? Or
eventually, but I was the guy that owned the pro shop was actually the racquetball pro. Yeah. And it took a while before he wanted to give up the easy money.
Ease him out.
Standing in the pro shop was not the easiest way to earn a living for him. Teaching lessons and charging $50 an hour, which at the time was a fair amount of money. That was what he wanted to do. So that's how I got the pro shop job. Right. And he got to teach more lessons. Right. But eventually I did get to take over that. Yeah.
Right on.
Are the tournaments like other sports? Is it seasonal? So it's not year round?
Not really, because racquetball is indoors, we are able to play all the time. Mm-hmm. And so, especially here in Phoenix, a lot of times there were more tournaments in the summer because it's so hot outside that you're better off being indoors doing something. And then in the winter, when it's nice, then you're out hiking and doing other things like that. So, but yeah, I played about 26 tournaments a year. So that's literally one every other week.
Right on.
And you were ranked internationally. So how does that work when you're primarily playing in one city? There's some type of ranking that you compare with everyone else?
So the Pro Tour is technically the International Racquetball Tour because we have events in Mexico and we have events in Canada as well. And we would get players that would come from around the world to compete. Mm-hmm. Now, it's not pro tennis. We always wanted to be pro tennis, but we're tennis's ugly cousin, right? I mean, it's a reality. We know that. Eventually you come to accept it, right?
Well, now there's pickleball, so you guys can pass starting on that one. you can pass that designation off to pickleball.
This is gonna piss a lot of people off, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it anyway. And
here we go.
Read my lips. When I'm no longer an athlete, I'll start playing pickleball. Now, I know I'm going to get a lot of hate mail for that one.
That's awesome.
I feel a lot of good athletes have switched over to playing pickleball, but it's similar enough to racquetball that I don't really want to switch over to that and compete with a lot of the same guys. And I wanted to reinvent myself when I finally did decide to step away from the game. Yeah. And to me, pickleball was too close, and so many people have migrated from racquetball to that I just didn't think it was the evolution that I was looking for personally.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, we might want to edit that out. I'm definitely going to get a lot of hate emails. I'm just kidding. I'll take it all day long.
So now So I'm sorry, I missed it though. Are you still playing professionally, or did you stop?
No. I stopped that quite a bit ago. And to Zach's question earlier, you know, when I played on the pro tour, which was quite a while ago now, we played events in Mexico, US, and Canada, and there was players that would come here. Now, if you look at the rankings in the top 10, I think it's 7 or 8 of the men, and it's the same thing on the women's tour in the top 10 are from South America.
Oh, really?
So at some point,
is it more popular down in South America than in the US right now?
It's the 80s in South America, if you understand that, right? Like when racquetball was in its heyday here in the 80s, that's what it's like in South America now.
So in 40 years, pickleball is going to be off the charts.
No doubt, and maybe even sooner. But some of the players are supported by their government. Like the #1 woman in the world is from Mexico, and she has a lot of government support, and she is a superstar in her country. The fact that she wins world titles and is the dominant player in her sport, her government has funded a lot of that for her, and so she literally is a rock star in her country.
Well, wasn't there was a form of, just to kind of a little bit off topic, but I think there was a form of handball, or it wasn't racket play, but it was some sort of court played ball game in Aztec Mexico, basically, that they had courts for those. It's kind of in their culture.
It is, absolutely. So yes, you're exactly right. There's some talk that it used to be played with the head of an enemy, and it was more like soccer. There's also talk about it being like a bunch of feathers wrapped with rawhide, and it was started out as handball, and then they started using objects, and so that technically made it a racket type sport and things like that. It's hard to really pin down the origin, but I've heard and read that multiple times, so there must be some level of truth to that as being a starting point for the sport.
Totally.
Yeah.
How did you? Go ahead, Zach.
Well, I was just going to ask. So you ended up playing for about 6 years as a pro?
I did. Yes.
Yeah.
And then when you kind of left, did you kind of ease out of it, or was there kind of an event?
Burned to a crisp.
Where you?
I really should have played 4 years professionally and been done, but my whole life had been about being a pro racquetball player. And I really struggled with, if I'm not this guy, who am I? And so I kind of went through the motions of that last season, and it showed. I didn't have the results that I wanted. And it all ended at a tournament in Chicago where I played a guy. Long story, but the short version is the guy that hosted that event every year in Chicago got forced out of the health club that he was in. And so in order to keep the tournament alive, to rebuild his own business, he bought a health club that had been closed down for like 10 years. 2 weeks before the pro tournament was supposed to happen. So all they did was come in and resurface the courts to make sure the floors were okay to play on, and open the doors. So there's no local membership. My first match was on Thursday at 11 a.m. So everybody else is at work. Nobody's there. The locker rooms were a mess. I mean, it was just a disaster, right? And I play a guy from Canada who I believe that I should beat. And for some reason, he's not listening to me. He's winning the first game, and then he goes on to win the second game. And in between games, we come out of the court, and he said something to his buddy. He's like, "Hey, man, looks like I'll be done in about 15 minutes. Then we can go grab lunch." That didn't settle very well with me. So I beat him 11-0 the next game. But it was kind of like, okay, I proved my point. I am better than you, but I lost the fourth game.
Yeah.
And there was kind of a controversial point on the last point of the match. It wasn't close. I was down 10-4, but I didn't like the referee's call. Kelly kind of got in my way. It wouldn't have mattered. It was academic at that point. The ref calls match. I smash my racket on the floor and then fold it over my knee. I walk out. I walk over to the tournament director because I'm expected to referee the next match.
Right.
Because local players are not able to referee at that level, right? I told Hank, I said, "I'm taking the fine. I'm going home." I picked up my stuff. I walked 4 miles to the hotel in the cold. This is in October in Chicago, right? So I'm still in my sweaty clothes. I go to the hotel. I pack up my stuff. I get a cab because this was way before Uber or anything. And I go to the airport in my sweaty clothes. and I sit there for 4 hours until I can get a flight to Phoenix.
Oh, man.
And I did something I never, ever do. I called my dad to pick me up because I live way closer to the airport than he does.
Right.
And I think he knew what was going on. He shows up, and I still have my knee pad around my ankle and my court shoes on. And I come walking up, and I'm waiting for this rah. You know, you got to, when things get tough, you got to get back on the horse, all that stuff. And he looks at me and he goes, "You're done, aren't you?"
Time.
And I just burst into tears. I said, "Yep, it's over. It's all over." And I just let it all out in that one moment, all the way back to my house. I cried my eyes out. And then I'm waiting for the fatherly advice of, you know, okay, here's what we're going to do next. And all he said to me was, "I know you'll figure it out."
Yeah.
And that was it. And he was right. It took a while, and I felt very lost until I could get my feet under me and recreate who I was. Because in my head, I was that guy, and now that's over. That chapter.
For many, many years, you were that guy. Like you had a 6-year career as a pro, and then even before that, you were so committed.
Yep. It's all I saw. I had blinders on. And as we were talking before we started, you know, I was that maniacal approach to my craft, right?
Yeah.
Like when I watched The Last Dance or the documentaries about Kobe Bryant, I'm not saying I was as dominant as those guys, but I had that mindset and that killer mentality about everything I did on and off the court to maximize my potential. And I lived that way for 10 years to get there, and then 6 years on the pro tour. And at 30, it was all over with, and I didn't know what to do for a while. But that's how I ended up getting into coaching the team at ASU.
You know what's interesting, too, is just on that is even if you didn't have a long wrestling career, that's one thing that I've noticed about people that do wrestling, and obviously other sports as well. But there's a kind of there's like a deep water aspect about the personalities with people that wrestling in particular, like, or, you know, there's just something about, and there's a calmness about it as well, but it's very interesting, and it is a little psychopathic, as we mentioned, but there's also a thing where you can turn on something inside of yourself. And I bet you, I think it's a feature, not a bug, right? I think it's something that maybe you're born with, and the fact that you get into wrestling or something similar is just the outcome, you know, but you just have that thing. And
I love the way you put that it's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah.
I don't know that, I can't necessarily say that I was born with it, but because my dad was an excellent wrestler in high school and beyond, I certainly was, I hate to use the word groomed because it has a different connotation these days, but I was brought up with that being the goal, that that's how I was going to make my mark in high school, and that's how I was going to get to college. And as you know, I mean, the wrestlers are crazy, right? I mean, you're losing weight at the time of your life where you're growing the most.
Right.
You need to suck all the weight off of your frame that you can. I mean, I wrestled at 98 pounds my freshman year. Wow. I had to lose 10 pounds to get there, but that's 10% of my body weight as a freshman in high school, right?
Yeah.
So that was very, very difficult.
And
I don't know if I could have kept that up, but I did it one time to try to qualify for my spot on the team. I don't know if I could have done that throughout a whole season. Who knows?
And that's a grind. I mean, that's, you know, there's a grind aspect about it. And so I've been off the mats for a while, so I don't want to pretend that, you know, but I did jiu-jitsu for quite a long time. And I know that I talk about this every once in a while when I'm in really, really tough spots, and, you know, I smoked for many years. And so I still don't have the wind that I should, but the wrestling kind of cardio is a different type. And when you're in it, but even still, like, I would find myself in positions and be like just under it, and big, 20-year-old kid who's 200 pounds and he's just beating the crap out of me. But sometimes when you're in a tight spot, as things are kind of getting dark, that grind or that wrestler's mind or something, it just kind of tells you to just, you can keep going, even though your body's like, forget it. There's like a little tiny pinhole that slowly but surely, and it's crazy how that is. That's the only way I can explain it.
Yeah. It's a learned skill.
Yeah.
Like you said, you put yourself in those positions to practice that. to have the calmness during the chaos and to know that I can take more. I don't know if this guy can, but I know I can take more.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's all it takes.
And that's the thing about, you know, what we do and what this whole podcast is about too, right? This 10X. It's not necessarily like, hey, go out and be Grant Cardone or whatever's going out the next 10X thing. It's about how do you kind of dig deep and find ways to make exponential changes, whatever that looks like for you.
Yep.
Right. And how do you kind of really turn back on yourself and have those conversations with yourselves to move forward in positive ways, you know?
Yeah. And when I was the coach at ASU, and now as I'm coaching executive clients, that's really my goal. And I don't really like the term life coach, so I gravitate towards self-optimization. So to your point, I'm teaching people to take more, to be calm during the chaos, to be able to grind things out and get to where they want to go, because resiliency is a major key to success.
Yeah.
And sometimes people really do need to be shown how that works and tested and prove to themselves, oh, wow, I actually can do it. And boy, once you light that fire in somebody, man, they can be off and running in no time.
Love that. Love that. And
how do you get into coaching at ASU?
Yeah. So there was a guy that was a good tournament player that I competed against who went to ASU and was on the racquetball team. And they kind of had a club at that stage. They didn't really have a coach. They had a guy that was an organizer. And he said, hey, would you ever consider coming to ASU and do a 1-hour clinic with some of our players? He said, I got a funky style. I'm not the right guy to teach anybody how to play, but you would be a great model for the beginner and intermediate players to kind of learn how to learn from. I'm like, yeah, 1 hour, sure, no problem. Well, 6 hours a week, 9 months a year, 15 years later, I've recently retired from that role.
Wow.
And it was the most personally rewarding thing that I've ever done, for sure. It was amazing.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And I would say that if I had to list my top 25 racquetball memories, 18 of them are probably from being a coach, maybe more. I just had the privilege of having some amazing teams, some amazing individuals, incredible experiences on and off the court with people. I mean, I get chills just telling the stories about how one of my girls broke her left wrist, luckily, during a tournament and kept playing and ended up making it to Collegiate All-American her senior year, which was her goal, and all kinds of incredible stories like that. It was an amazing time, and it was hard for me to leave, but the timing was right, and I was able to hand the program off to a couple of other coaches that I knew would pick up right where I left off. So everything kind of came together for me to step away and focus on some new things.
That's great. Now you had a pretty big setback, right? Something really scary. So you have talk to us about this head-on collision, and when did that happen in this whole timeline, and what did that change for you?
So March 8th, 2015. So it's been a little while. I was headed to go fishing with my dad in Payson, Arizona, which is about 90 minutes from Phoenix. And by the grace of God, he was already in Payson waiting for me. He was up there for the weekend, and I was driving up on Sunday morning to catch up with him. So he was not in the car with me. So I packed up my stuff. I head out, and it's still early. I left at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm driving towards Payson, which is you go through some mountains and stuff. And I've done that trip since I was 12 years old, most of the time with my dad. So I joked that I could practically make that drive blindfolded, right? So I get to the top of the last mountain, and I look down, and I can see that there's flashing lights from a construction zone down near the bottom. And I'm by myself. I can't see another car coming for miles in either direction. So I'm weaving my way through, and then in the construction zone, the lanes are pinched from 2 down into 1 lane, and there's concrete barriers on either side. And I come around the last curve, and all of a sudden there's headlights in front of me. And I screamed and hammered the brakes, and this massive crash, twisting metal, everything goes dark for a second, and I can hear somebody screaming, oh my God, over and over and over. And it sounds like it's coming from behind me. And the best explanation I could give is that crash knocked my soul into the back seat. And then after a few seconds, I came back together and felt like I was in one piece again. So I'm in the middle of nowhere. I know that I have to call for help. So I'm feeling around for my phone. I can't open the doors. So I got to climb out the driver's side window. The airbags are deployed, windshield's mangled, all that stuff. And I go to check on the other guy, and I get within about 20 feet of his car, and I can smell the alcohol. And he opens the door, and he just kind of pours out onto the highway and sits there. And then I realize there's cars coming down the mountain. So I turn on my flashlight app on my cell phone, and I start running up the hill, waving my phone, trying to get that next car to stop.
But you weren't hurt, though. Like, I mean,
amazingly, no. I don't know how, because I was doing 65 miles an hour probably, and I assume he was doing the same. And he never touched his brakes. I did. There was tire marks on my side of the crash scene, but not his. So how I walked away from that is the hand of God or the universe protecting me, whatever you believe. But I was so fortunate to have been able to just, because it took 45 minutes for the paramedics to get there.
Yeah.
I would have been in the car with a broken leg or a bad laceration or something. I easily would have died on the highway that day, right?
Right.
So I get the next car to stop, and then the next, and then they start backing up. Eventually the paramedics arrive, and the tow truck driver eventually got there, and he loaded both cars up. And then I hitched a ride with him to the tow yard. And then when I got close to where the tow yard was, then I had a cell signal. And I've got 5 missed phone calls from my dad. And the last one, he left a message. And he said, "Hey man, you're never late to go fishing. I'm getting worried. What's going on?" So I call him, and I did what I think most people would do in that scenario. "Hey, I had a little bit of an accident. I'm okay. I'm fine. But here's where I'm at. Can you come get me? We're not going to be able to go fishing today." He's like, "Hang tight. I know where you are." And my dad's not, I guess you could say he's kind of on the stoic side, right? He's not one that shows a lot of emotion. But when he showed up at the tow yard and I'm leaning against the hood of my absolutely mangled car, he jumps out of his truck and he starts crying. And he just comes and grabs me and he hugs me. And that was when I lost it. The enormity of that moment all came pouring out right there. Wow. And I stood there crying. Here I am, 45 years old, crying like a child in my dad's arms, so thankful to be alive and that he's not coming to my funeral. Sorry, that gets me every time. I can't tell that story without getting choked up. But so I decided that I did not want to be a victim as part of that whole scenario. I didn't want this to keep me from going fishing or driving at night or any of those kind of things. I wasn't sure how to do that at first. And I did what I thought was right at first, which was, let's bury this. Let's get it behind me. Let's settle with the insurance company. The car was totaled. I got my check. I replaced the car. End of story. Let's move on. That's not how traumatic events work. So I dug it back up and put it on the table and started trying to figure out how to deal with it. So that's how I ended up doing guest speaking for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I started sharing that story to court-mandated classes so that people not only learn statistically some of the bad things about drinking and driving and the penalties that go along with it and all that, but to have a personal story that people can take away as to the bad decision that they made and what could have been a possible outcome for them. So,
I got a question for you. As you were a lot of times in those situations, we forget big chunks of stuff. Did you ever have like those kind of memories come back, throughout certain points in time, or did you really, it sounds like you were fairly lucid throughout the whole thing and remembered everything.
I knew
up until and afterwards.
Yeah. The only time I've ever really had a flashback or anything like that at all.
No, you remember?
I was with somebody and we went on a single lane exit bridge, and I was looking down at my phone. I wasn't driving. I was looking down at my phone, and I looked up, and there was a pickup truck coming the other way, and it was high enough that I could see the headlights above the wall. And that really freaked me out because that flashed me back to that moment.
Whoa.
Other than that, I really, knock on wood, I have not had, screaming nightmares or paranoia about driving or things like that. Right. I'm just really fortunate, or, maybe that's some of my grinder mentality of I'm just not letting those thoughts come through.
Well, and I was actually thinking more in terms of the body turning off certain memories and you know, some parts of it coming back to you that fill in some of the gaps, maybe, you know.
Yeah. I have complete recollection of everything that happened. And, in fact, I mean, it's so vivid that the first time I went and told this story in front of a Mothers Against Drunk Driving audience, I ran outside and threw up.
Oh gosh.
Because I was so emotionally moved by what I shared, and I had all that stored up from the impact of the crash, and some time had passed before I found my way to Mothers Against Drunk Driving. So, it was a buildup of all of that stuff, but it's been very cathartic telling that story. And even though I still get choked up, I get choked up telling the part about my dad, and then the next part when I'm telling the story about my fiance at the time, who's now my wife, those parts always get me.
Wow.
But I was able to kind of do my own therapy by sharing that story and telling it enough times to take most of the edge off of it.
Yeah.
But I hope that I don't ever lose all of it, because when I'm speaking to that audience in particular, I want them to understand how, pardon the pun, but how impactful that event was in my life.
Yeah. Well, did this kick off your kind of speaking career? Like,
got it.
Yeah.
How's that for a crazy impetus to get started?
Right.
But I found after a little while that I really enjoyed speaking in front of an audience and getting feedback from people, because I would have people come up and ask me questions and just say, hey, I want to shake your hand. I'm so glad you're okay. Thanks for sharing that story. And public speaking was something I was always really interested in, but it was the one thing that I never chose to pursue well, I was about to say, I'm not sure why, but actually that's not accurate. I thought about it for a long time, and if I'd have been an NFL player with an equivalent track record, public speaking would have been an easy segue. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people that said, there's a pro racquetball tour, right? So I just didn't think it had the same kind of clout to it. And I've been fortunate in my current day job. I'm the VP of sales for a company called Triage Now. I've been there 10 years, and I would consider my track record there equivalent to my racquetball career. Sure. So now that I have both sides of the coin, I feel like I truly have something to offer a much larger audience than I did previously when I was just a racquetball player. Nice. So that stuff coalesced nicely at the age that I'm at.
Right. So what types of topics do you discuss when you're speaking in front of businesses or self-improvement groups and things of that nature?
Yeah, I have a talk next week with a bunch of female entrepreneurs and CEOs. And so that particular talk is about overcoming adversity, which I've given a few examples of, right? I mean, I never would have been a racquetball player if I hadn't broken a bone in my neck, right? Sometimes that adversity and a pivot that occurs is the best thing that happens to you. It's just hard to see that in the moment, right? Yeah. So that's an easy one for me. Mindset in general, whether it is for a younger audience like high school or college. And I'm a recurring guest lecturer at both the ASU Business School and Northern Arizona Business School as well. And so for those kids, I typically talk about really true, real life skills like resume writing, interview preparation, how to go to a job fair and make the best use of that time. So it does depend on the audience, but I'm trying to narrow it down to not be such a generalist and such a coach trying to answer all questions. I'm trying to narrow it down to a couple of three main topics that I talk about most commonly and really focus on them.
Oh, that's really interesting. In terms of mindset and focusing on what your goals are there like specific pieces of advice you give in your talks? Visualization or writing things down or...
Yes to all of that. It depends on the audience, of course. I mean, if it's a little older audience, then certainly the references that I make, like the kids in college don't know the movie Rudy or Rocky, right? So I have to be who I'm speaking to, right? But to me, you have to have a very clear vision of what you want to accomplish and who you are in that role. And then you have to backfill that with all of the work, all of the visualization, all the grinding, all of the knowledge aggregation to build yourself towards being that person that can fulfill the role of the goal that you're shooting at.
Give me an example, just a quick example of that, who you are in the role in relation to the goal.
For example, I'll use myself. Okay, so, and I kind of alluded to this already, where it's like I wasn't sure that I was a guy that belonged on stage in front of 10,000 people or in an NFL locker room giving a rah-rah speech to a bunch of rookie NFL guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now that I'm a little older, I've been doing this a while, I actually hired a speaking coach for myself to really get to the next level. Now I can see that. In fact, I've gone on YouTube and looked at videos of guys doing talks in front of an audience of 5,000 or 10,000 people, and I just visualize me doing that talk instead of that person.
Gotcha.
That has helped bridge that gap to where I can truly see myself doing that instead of trying to see someone else do it and me copy it.
Understood. Okay, I gotcha. That's great.
I had a business coach, and one of the things that I always remember him telling me, because we're working on something, the result hasn't arrived yet, but you guys you got to believe, and you just got to keep doing the grind. And he had this analogy. It's like you're at a water pump and you're pumping and you're pumping and you're pumping and nothing's coming out. It's dry. And what you don't realize is the water is slowly rising. Right. And any minute now it could spill over. Yep. And so it's kind of, the grind can be like that. You're not seeing results, but you just have to have faith and keep at it.
And I think that's why I'm such a fan of athletics as a building block in people's lives, especially younger, because you are force-fed failure and redundancy and lack of results all the time.
Yeah.
But if you can tolerate that, you eventually learn that, oh, this is just part of the process. I got to fall down 7 times. As long as I get up the 8th time, I'm still in the race. I can still win this thing. And it just forces you into that mentality of accepting that, yeah, failure and backtracking once in a while and things like that are part of the process, or that I want it now, but I'm not ready for it now. I've got to do the work and build the base so that when it does happen, I'm not a long shot that got lucky. It's now a repeatable process that I can get those results over and over.
And on that point too, sometimes, to your analogy, Zach, the water, the way that it comes out of the pump, right? It doesn't look like exactly like you thought it was going to.
Right.
It
had a trickle at first, and
or it's just like an aggregation of water, and all of a sudden you have your pool of water that you were looking for.
Right.
You know what I mean? You turn around, you're like, oh my God, I'm already here. Okay.
Right. I just thought of a funny story that is a perfect tie-in with that. I thought when I won my first open tournament, which is the highest level amateur that you can play, that there would be like some sort of ticker tape parade and all of this stuff, right? The news would come and interview me. My girlfriend drugged me to Bed Bath & Beyond because we needed new bath towels.
That was your ticker tape parade,
which is the culmination of my life's work. I am at Bed Bath & Beyond trying to decide between gray and light gray bathroom towels. That's not what I pictured, right?
That's like, so I come out of the entertainment industry, long time in it, and so I've had so many of those moments of like, getting a big movie and an amazing role and thinking, okay, this is it. Yep. This is my break. I'm going to start ringing out. I want a TV series and and all that. And it's not that the experience was anything. It was just kind of like you're waiting for the next thing to come.
Yeah.
And again, success doesn't look exactly like, but if I look back now, I'm like, God, I did really, really well. Still, and but it's not in the moment. It just doesn't happen that way. And I know that, in certain circumstances, it could just strike you by lightning, and all of a sudden, something incredible happens out of your control, and you're thrown into this craziness.
Yep.
Which is very.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for success until I had it. If it would have happened sooner, like when I was 18 or 20, I would have been a disaster. I would not have been able to handle, even in the microscopic world of racquetball, showing up at a club, if you're the guy that's on the poster and all that stuff, it's like that. My ego was big enough, even though I started later on. If that would have happened sooner, man, it would have been a bad story for sure.
100%. Really, really agree with that a lot. Do you so now you're on, obviously you're an entrepreneur and you're working on an app right now. Talk to us a little bit about that. What's that about?
Yeah, thanks. So one of the struggles I had with going and speaking to high school and college kids was I get like 45 minutes or maybe an hour of time, and I touch on a few topics and I try to dive deep on some of them, but you know, I have a limited amount of exposure to them. So I wanted a way to try to impart more knowledge and give them resources that I was not able to cover during the talk. And I write a blog incessantly. I literally posted blog number 409 this week. Wow. But I hate to say it, but in today's world, lots of kids don't bother reading a blog that I post on LinkedIn, right? So the phone app was the ideal delivery system because so many kids today live their life like this, that is the way to spoon feed it the information that they need. So the app is an extension of the talks that I do. There's a section on resume writing, and it's not just my material. I'm certainly aggregating from experts in all kinds of fields.
Sure.
But resume writing, interview preparation, basic personal finance, mindset, lifestyle design, things like that are meant to be life resources for, let's call it 16 to maybe 25-year-olds.
That sounds like a great app.
That's really cool, actually.
It's called Chatterbox, and it's if you look for it in the app stores, it's Chatter, CHATTR-box, and you'll see a picture of me, holding a microphone, speaking to an audience, and there's some free content in it that I want to make sure that people can get a taste of it before they commit to the month-to-month $6 fee that it costs. It's meant to be very accessible to every college kid out there, right? It's the same price as a cup of coffee from Dutch Bros, which I see all of them walking around with in their hands. So, I wanted it to be as accessible as possible. And I'm always going to be, I foresee myself continuing to add more and more information into it. It's not meant to be a static thing where it's like, here, I made this, check it out. I put the blogs in it. I constantly looking for more information to add to it. I mean, like some of the stuff is like, there's an adulting 101 section, which things I wish I knew when I went to college, right? Like I lived on canned soup and my microwave my whole freshman year of college. Well, I have a bunch of really easy recipes and things to do that any college guy that's never had much time in the kitchen could figure out and feed himself a little more effectively than I did.
That's
so cool. It's really, I don't have kids of my own, and since I'm no longer the coach of the racquetball team, I guess in some ways this is scratching my coaching/parenting itch, hoping to help as many people as possible not make some of the mistakes that I did, but also leapfrog themselves forward in areas that they may be struggling with.
That's very cool. Yeah, what's interesting is we don't have kids, but I'm watching my nephew go through his college experience, and for some reason, of course, he's still 7 years old, right? To me, you know what I mean? But like, just kind of watching some of the things he knows and doesn't know. I never thought I would be in this whole uncle situation and looking back, because I always think I'm young and hip and
right.
I mean, and like, but
I've run of that illusion myself.
To watch him struggle and realize he's the same donkey as I was back when I was that young, and like see him go through it, but also learning some of these things and being taught. He actually he goes to school near my mother, so to save money he goes to school and lives with my mother, and so she teaches him also. Good. And I'm sure it scratches her itch because she never got to teach me because I was out of the house, like so she likes that part of it too. But I think that's really cool that a lot of younger people kind of, I don't know if they struggle, but maybe they go down paths where they think they have it, right? And they get involved in all kinds of crazy things.
Yep.
Really don't have anything to do with anything later.
Yeah. Well, this has repeated itself in every generation. Yeah. At 18, we think we know everything. At 25, we realize we don't. At 35, we realize we don't know much of anything. And at 50, it's like, oh my God, what am I doing? I don't have a clue about anything, right? So it's worse, right? It would be ideal if it was the other way around, but we as humans don't operate that way for some reason.
So you need to make an app for 50-year-olds.
At some point, I may do that as well. I'm still figuring some of that out myself, so I'm sticking with the stuff that I have been through because I know that knowledge is valid.
Cool, man.
So the app is called Chatterbox.
Yeah.
Okay. Without an E, Chattr.
No, there's an E, it's ER, but
Oh, it is ER.
there's
Okay.
a dash in between the word chatter and box.
Okay, great. And it's on Apple and Google
And Android, yep.
and Android.
Yeah.
Terrific. And where's if people want to learn more about you, what's the best way to find out about you?
So my website is darrinchatter.com, and I'm also on LinkedIn. I actually have 2 LinkedIn profiles, but I do have a speaker one, which is, it says Darrin Chatter as all one word, and then LLC is my last name, because that's how LinkedIn makes you format it. So yeah, I mean, I'm always here trying to help people, and I don't mean, acquiring more coaching clients. I mean, if there's somebody that has a specific question or wants to bounce an idea off of me, I love that stuff, right? So the website has my blogs, it has the talk topics that I do most often. It has the story about my drunk driver crash on it. There's a video that I did for Mothers Against Drunk Driving that's on the opening page. So yeah, please check it out. And if there's somebody that I can assist, by all means, let me know.
Great, Darren.
Well, this has been
Fascinating and great talk, man. Really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure, guys. This was fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
10X for Gen XYZ is hosted by Zach Winter and Mark Adair Rios, co-founders of Prosperity CRE, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and building long-term wealth. If you like the podcast, please give us a positive rating and subscribe to be notified about future content. Also, if you'd like to learn more about our approach to real estate investing, you can download a free copy of our real estate investment book, Investing for Cash Flow and Long-Term Wealth, by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thank you and stay tuned for our upcoming episodes.